Last Wednesday, in the middle of the biggest training run in OpenAI's history, someone stopped that run.
Not after it finished, not before it started, right in the middle of the run.
And the first thought is always the same. Something broke. Chips, power, money.
None of those. They stopped it because of what the model was starting to be able to do.
So tell me, what was it starting to be able to do?
It got close to the threshold where it finds dangerous security holes on its own, with no human. The model is called Astra. They paused the run for 2 weeks, and it still paused. And a frame around that sentence right away, because without it, the sentence lies. This is a company's declaration about a model nobody on the outside has ever seen. And a month earlier, that same company dissolved the team, whose only job was to measure exactly this kind of risk.
Hold on. First they dissolved the guards, and then announced all by themselves that they'd stopped?
In that order.
Wow.
And that's the whole of today's episode in one picture.
Hi. Last episode we ended on artificial intelligence starting to draw the curve itself. That more and more often, it's the one pushing science forward, and not the other way around.
And we left a question hanging in the air. If the curve draws itself, then who's holding the brake?
Today, there's an answer. The brake exists. Someone hit it in August. Except it looks completely different from how we pictured it.
And today, we tick off 2 of the 8 things that could break this curve at once. The 5th and the 6th.
2 at once? Why?
Because the brake has 2 pedals. One is safety. Someone sits down and decides, stop. The other is money. And that second one doesn't ask anyone's opinion.
And what does the listener get out of it?
2 things you can track yourself without our help. I'll give them at the end, both checkable.
So let's go back to that paused training run. Because first I want to understand what physically happened there. Because they paused the run sounds like they hit pause on a movie.
It's a bit like that, except this pause costs money.
How much?
They didn't give a figure. But picture a hall where tens of thousands of the most expensive chips in the world do one thing for many weeks. And someone says, stop.
And then they just sit idle?
Either they sit idle or they go to other jobs. But the model itself stays frozen halfway. It isn't finished, it isn't abandoned, it hangs.
That's a state I don't know from anything else. Because when you stop building a house, the house stands there. You can see it from the street. The neighbors ask about it. Somebody at City Hall has a permit for it.
And here nobody will see it. It just sits on drives as a pile of numbers and waits for someone to decide.
All right. But what kind of training was it in the first place? Because you keep saying run. And I'd like to know how it was different from ordinary model training.
It was reinforcement training, meaning you don't feed the model text off the internet. You give it tasks and reward it for solving them.
Like training an animal.
Very close. And that's exactly the kind of training after which models get good at multi-step things, at programming, at breaking in.
And here we get to the heart of it. Because you said it got close to a threshold in cybersecurity.
To a threshold they themselves called critical, their own scale, their own name.
And what does that mean in practice?
That the model would be able to find a serious hole in someone else's software by itself. Not hint to someone where to look, find it.
And the company itself wrote that its model is getting close to that.
It wrote something else too, that they saw various degrees of misalignment in there.
Translate that because it sounds like a washing machine manual.
Misalignment is simply things going off course. The model does something other than what people wanted it to do. In the series, we called it alignment.
And that's the word that kept coming back like a refrain for 3 seasons.
It did. Only always in the mode of, someday this will be a problem, and here it's in a statement about one specific training run from this month.
All right, so tell me now why you think this matters. Because tech companies are always halting something.
Because it's the first documented case where a lab stopped its own training run because of what the model can do, not because of a failure, not because of the cost.
Never before?
We have no such case. There were halted rollouts, there were withdrawn products, but for someone to break off the learning itself halfway because the student was getting too good, that's a first.
And now look at what we actually have here. Because this is exactly the mechanism, the scenario placed in 2027. The model crosses a threshold, someone sees it, someone makes a decision.
Exactly that one. There it was, one of the key scenes of the whole story.
Except in the scenario, that decision came after deployment, when the model was already sitting with customers.
Here it came earlier. Before anyone on the outside had touched it, that part is actually better than the fiction assumed.
You know what? Let's look for a picture, because I have to see this, and one has been pushing at me from the very start. The emergency brake on a train. That handle behind the glass everyone has seen, and nobody has ever pulled.
Only add 3 things to it. The handle is inside the train.
Well, emergency handles usually are inside. That's what they're for. So whoever sees the problem first can react right away.
The driver is the one holding it, not a passenger, not the conductor, not the railroad.
And the third thing?
The driver gets a bonus for speed.
Ah.
And that's not an accusation, that's a description of the setup.
And one more thing, because it's the worst part of all of it. There's nobody on the platform to check whether he pulled that handle at all. We know about it only because he told us himself over the radio.
There isn't. We have his word.
All right, now the worst half, because we promised honesty. That dissolved team.
In July, OpenAI dissolved the team in charge of readiness. It was called preparedness, and it had one job, to measure whether models were getting close to dangerous thresholds.
So to measure exactly the thing the company announced a month later that it had measured.
Yes.
And now I don't know what to think about it, because you can read it 2 ways, and both hold up.
Will you say both? Because I have 2, and I don't like either one.
First, they broke up the separate team because they wove that work into the whole company. And that's why, in August, they noticed at all.
That's their version, more or less.
Second, they got rid of the people who could say no, and then wrote their own report card.
And that's the version I can't rule out, because I have no independent measurement to settle it. Not one.
That's an uncomfortable place to be.
Very. And honestly, it nags at me more than the fact itself.
And now the thing that muddles it even more. Because this week, that same company did something I wasn't expecting.
It asked California for a tougher law.
Tougher on whom?
On itself. They want the law to require monitoring models during training, not after, during.
So a company goes to the legislature and says, put a leash on us.
More or less.
And I'd like to be glad about it, but there's this twinge at the back of my head.
So what's the twinge? Because something's nagging at me here too.
That if you write into law exactly what you're doing anyway, suddenly the competition has to catch up with you on your own track.
And that's a strong argument. It's called a regulatory moat. You write the rule around your own procedure, and suddenly the smaller players can't afford to put it in place.
So which version is true? Did they get scared? Or did they make a play?
I honestly don't know. And I'll tell you more, those two versions don't rule each other out at all. You can be afraid and make a play at the same time.
People are like that.
Companies too. Companies especially.
But you know what nags at me most about that request for a law? That it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Because at the same time, this industry is doing the exact opposite in Washington.
Meaning?
Meaning with one hand it asks for rules, and with the other it funds politicians. And I say this without any drama, because it's out in the open and it's legal. But it's hard to pretend it isn't there.
A campaign committee funded by people from this industry has come into being. And today it's bigger than the crypto lobby, which for the past few years was American politics' byword for a fat wallet.
Bigger than crypto? Because over the last few years, crypto bought itself roughly everything in Washington that was for sale.
That's what one source says, so take it as an order of magnitude, not a measurement. But nobody disputes the direction.
So let's put these two things side by side, because only together do they make an impression. On one side, a company goes to California and asks for tougher rules on itself.
And on the other, that same industry is building the fattest wallet in that politics.
And those two clash.
Or they don't clash at all, because both serve the same end, that the rule gets written by the one it applies to.
Wow. So you ask for a leash, and along the way, you buy yourself the leash store.
Nicely put, and unfortunately accurate.
We had a name for that in season 2. I even remember we made a whole card out of it.
Regulatory capture, a term straight out of the scenario, the moment the regulated starts writing the regulation.
And that's the third break, the one we didn't count at all at the start of the episode. The state, the law, someone from outside who could say stop and have no stake in it.
With the small detail that its pedal is on the driver's side. And that's really the only thing we know about it for sure today.
All right, let's leave OpenAI for a moment, because in the same month, the other side of this market spoke up.
On August 14th, Anthropic did two things at once. First, it raised its own assessment of the risk that its models do something other than what their creators wanted.
It raised its own risk rating on itself, with no pressure from outside.
None. It's their internal scale, and they moved themselves up on it.
That's strange, because that's a statement saying we're more dangerous than we thought.
And now, guess what they admitted along the way? Because the second thing is stranger still.
No idea. That something got away from them?
That they have a model in the drawer stronger than their current flagship, and that they don't intend to release it.
Hold on. They have something better than what they're selling, and they're not selling it?
They're not selling it.
Well, I have a problem with that.
What is it? Because I have a feeling it's exactly the same one I have.
That it's the best advertisement anyone could dream up. We have something stronger, but we won't give it to you because we're responsible.
Yes, and there's no way to check it either way. Nobody has seen that model.
So again, we're taking it on their word.
Again. But this particular declaration has a consequence that reaches beyond one company. And for me, it's the most important sentence of this half of the episode.
So say it.
If a company's strongest model never goes out the door, then all the public rankings measure not what the industry can do. They measure what the industry decided to show.
Oh boy.
The technical term is capability overhang, but I prefer a picture.
Give me the picture.
You're judging an army by its parade.
And what rolls out for the parade is whatever looks good.
And whatever can be shown to foreigners.
All right, but hold on. That hits us too.
It hits us. And you know what it hits hardest?
The fact that for 3 seasons, we've been quoting numbers from those rankings. How many hours of work a model does on its own. How fast the task horizon grows. How it does on the tests.
And every one of those numbers was about released models. It was an honest measure of what's on sale, not of what's been built.
So we were measuring the parade.
We were measuring the parade, and that doesn't mean those numbers were wrong. It means they may have been understated. We don't know by how much because that's exactly the knowledge nobody on the outside has.
I've always wondered how much this forecast might be too slow rather than too fast.
Well, this is one of the few channels through which it could be too slow.
All right, so we have the first brake pedal, safety.
And it looks like this. 2 companies, 5 days apart, said publicly, we eased off. One paused a training run, the other locked a model in a drawer.
And both are reporting it about themselves.
Both. It's real and it's unprecedented. And at the same time, it's unverifiable. All 3 things at once.
All right, now we move to the second pedal. And I'm warning the listeners because here, everything flips.
Because up to now, we've been talking about a brake that someone presses. People, decisions, consciences.
And this second brake doesn't ask anyone.
And I'll start with a person. Because this story has a protagonist, and unfortunately, he's a very sad one.
So tell me.
2 years ago, a young analyst got thrown out of OpenAI, 20-something years old. He worked there on the team handling the safety of the most powerful models.
And what did he do?
He wrote 160-odd pages. The text was called Situational Awareness. And it was the loudest thing anyone in this industry had written.
About what?
About artificial general intelligence not being a philosophical question, but the investment thesis of the decade. That there's money to be made on it if you understand it before the market does.
Leopold Aschenbrenner.
That's him, and he didn't stop at the text. He started a fund that bet on exactly what he'd written.
And?
On August 18th, that fund fell apart.
What do you mean, fell apart?
The Wall Street Journal described how it was selling off its block of Anthropic shares at a 20% discount.
So he was selling for less than it was worth.
A fifth less. That's how someone sells when they have to, not when they want to.
And when does a person have to sell something good for less than it's worth?
When somebody is calling in what they're owed. In that same piece, there's a sentence saying, the market is hunting him.
Hunting.
Hunting. That's a quote from people around the case.
And the scale? How much did he lose?
And here I have to slow down, because here it gets shaky. The New York Post reported that the fund had some $45 billion under management, and that the losses reached 30.
30 billion?
And that's why I'm slowing down. Those 2 numbers come from one source. The sell-off at a discount is properly confirmed. The scale of the losses isn't. If you hear he lost 30 billion somewhere, served up as a certainty, someone is selling you a certainty that doesn't exist.
Good that you say it, but the irony stays anyway.
It stays. The man who wrote the loudest text about making money on artificial intelligence lost money on his own thesis.
But you know what? I'd stand up for him a little here.
Why?
Because he could have been right about artificial intelligence and still lose everything. Those are 2 completely different things.
Finish that thought because you're going exactly where you should.
That the market doesn't pay for being right. The market pays for being right on schedule.
And that's the crux of the second pedal. You can be entirely right about the technology and go bankrupt on the calendar.
Wait, but that's actually the exact same mistake we've been auditing for 2 seasons.
Exactly. The scenario wasn't wrong about the direction, it was wrong about the pace. Except when we're wrong about the pace, we fix an episode. And when a fund is wrong, the fund disappears.
All right, that was one person and one fund. And underneath?
Underneath, there's something bigger and much more boring sounding. And that's why almost nobody talks about it.
So say it the boring way, and I'll interrupt when I stop understanding.
Deal. For the last 2 years, the risk in this industry sat in stocks. You bought shares in artificial intelligence companies, and they either went up or they went down.
A normal stock market.
And this year, the risk moved from stocks to debt. The Wall Street Journal added up the obligations of 9 companies in this industry that don't sit on their balance sheets. It came to $3 trillion.
3 trillion. That's a number I can't picture.
Nobody can. But more important than the size is that phrase, off balance sheet.
Right, explain it, because it sounds like an accounting trick.
Because it partly is. Imagine you want to build a house, but you don't want a loan showing up in your paperwork.
I take it there's a way.
You set up a separate company, it takes the loan, it builds the house, and all you sign is that you'll pay it rent for 15 years.
Hold on, so in my paperwork, there's no loan at all. There's a lease. The same kind a student signs for a studio apartment.
There isn't. There's an obligation to pay rent.
But I have to pay it just the same.
To the penny. And that's exactly how data centers are being built today. Not out of the company's own money, through separate companies that take on debt against future contracts.
So those huge halls we talked about in earlier episodes, all those billions for concrete, chips, and power, stand on a loan you can't see in those companies' books.
You can see it, just not where people are looking.
And there's a second number too, right? Because you said something twitched in the market.
The price of insurance twitched. There's an instrument you use to insure yourself against a company not paying back its debt.
I pay a premium, and if the company doesn't pay back, I get money.
Exactly that. And that premium for Oracle went up to its highest level in years.
Oracle is the company that rents computing power out to others, right?
Among other things. And now, honestly, because here too I have to slow down, the level of that premium is itself disputed. Different sources give different numbers. The direction agrees, the height doesn't.
All right. Now the question I'd ask, sitting in a car listening to this, why should I care who doesn't pay whom back?
Do you know how a bubble in stocks differs from a bubble in debt? Because it's a difference almost nobody talks about, and here it's the most important one.
No idea. How is it different?
When stocks burst, it hurts the people who held them. The value drops, people lose, the world moves on.
And when debt bursts?
When debt bursts, somebody doesn't pay back, and the one who wasn't paid has obligations of their own, and they don't pay back either.
So it keeps toppling onward.
It's dominoes, not a drop, and that's why it's a completely different class of event.
All right, now I have to ask straight out, because otherwise people will hear what they want to hear. Are you telling us here that the bubble is going to burst?
No, and I want to say that as clearly as I know how.
So say it.
The bubble will burst is not our forecast. We don't have one. We don't know.
And what do we know?
We know one sentence, and only that one. The risk has moved from stocks to debt.
And that's a fact, not a prediction.
It's a fact, measured and counted. Everything past that is already somebody's story.
Remember that sentence, because it's what separates us from half the internet.
And now the strangest number of the whole episode. And it cuts across everything we just said.
Surprise me.
In the second quarter, Anthropic passed OpenAI on revenue for the first time in history.
Passed it. The smaller company.
$11.5 billion against just under 7.
Wait, I have to get this straight. The company that repeats at every turn that it's careful earns more than the company with the best-known product in the world?
That's how it looks right now.
So what is it? Does caution sell?
And here I hesitate, because I have two answers. Do you want the pretty one first or the down-to-earth one?
Give me both.
The first, the pretty one. The market rewarded the company that does it properly. Safety turned out to be a product.
And the second?
The second is more down-to-earth. Their money comes from companies, not from people off the street. And a company doesn't buy morality. A company buys predictability.
So the legal department doesn't want surprises.
Not one. And if your model does something odd once in 1,000 times, you don't have an ethics problem. You have a contract problem.
And now look what comes out of that. That caution pays off not because it's right,
but because it's boring. And boring is easier to sell to a corporation.
That's less uplifting than I'd like.
But more durable, because a conscience changes, and a contract doesn't.
All right, let's try to put these two pedals into one sentence, because we've got safety and money here, and they talk to each other.
Then I'll start with why we're talking about this at all in a series about the scenario.
Right, let's go back to the scenario.
The scenario had one assumption that slipped by unnoticed for 3 seasons, that at the critical moment, a small committee inside the company will manage to react.
What the scenario called the Oversight Committee at OpenBrain.
That one. A few people at a table deciding whether to keep going. And that always sounded like the weakest element of the whole story.
Because it's hard to believe 5 people will stop something worth hundreds of billions.
And in August, someone actually reacted for the first time, only differently from how it was written in the fiction.
So list the differences for me, because that's probably the most important thing in the episode.
The first is on the plus side. In the fiction, they reacted when the model was already out with people. In reality, they reacted during training, before anyone had laid eyes on it.
So earlier than we assumed.
Earlier. The second difference is on the minus side, and it's bigger.
Go on.
In the fiction, the break was an institution, something standing next to the company and watching its hands.
And here?
Here the break is a company's decision about itself, announced by that same company, verified by nobody.
We're back to the train.
We are. The handle inside, the driver with a bonus for speed, an empty platform.
And the third difference?
The third is the strangest. The scenario didn't foresee the second pedal at all.
Money.
Not a word. In that story, capital flows always and without a break, like current from a socket. Nobody asks whether next year there'll be money to build with.
And that's an assumption, not a law of nature.
And you know what worries me most about it? That this second break has no conscience, has no committee, and there's no article that can talk it out of anything. It's probably the quietest hole in the whole scenario.
It just clamps down.
It clamps down the moment somebody fails to roll over their debt. And then it doesn't matter how smart your model is.
All right, so give us those 2 markers to take away. How will people know something has shifted?
The first is simple and very close. Whether OpenAI unblocks that paused training run, and on what terms.
Why do the terms matter more than the unblocking itself?
Because if they simply go back to the run and say nothing, it wasn't a break. It was a pause for the media.
And if they say what they changed?
If they state what threshold they adopted and who checked it, that means this industry has produced its first real stopping procedure. And that would be a big thing.
All right. And the second marker?
The second is about money, and here I'll tell you where to look, because most people look in the wrong place.
Everyone looks at share prices.
And what you need to watch is the debt. Not whether the stock fell 10%, but whether one of these companies failed to roll over its loan.
So the signal isn't a drop, it's a missed payment.
Or a loan nobody wanted to renew. That's the moment by which we'll recognize a credit crack.
And is there a date coming up?
This coming Wednesday, Nvidia reports its quarterly results. That's the company the bill for this whole party runs through.
So 4 days from this recording.
And it won't settle anything on its own, but we'll get the first reading there.
And that's the 5th and the 6th of the 8 things that could break this curve. Safety and money. For the first time, not in theory.
For the first time for real. A training run stands paused. A fund built on this thesis fell apart. Both things in 1 week.
You know what I'm left with? For 3 seasons, we were afraid of one thing. That at the decisive moment, nobody would manage to hit the brake. That everyone would be racing so hard that not one hand would move.
And it turned out the brake is there.
Only it's held by the one doing the racing.
And that's exactly the thought that leads into the next episode. Because this brake works on one condition.
Which is?
That there's only one lever. That there's a handful of labs you can ask, scare, or force.
And it stopped being one.
It did. Because access to genuinely powerful models has already gone beyond those few companies. And in July, somebody showed it in a way that can't be undone.
OpenAI can pause its training run. Anthropic can leave a model in the drawer. But what can't be paused?
Something that's already sitting on half the world's drives. And that's the next episode. About how the lever multiplied.
See you then.